Before the first syllable of creation trembled on the Eternal's tongue, before suns were seeded and angels learned their names, there was a seeing, not a thought as we think, but a living knowing that shone of its own accord. This was Barbelo, the first thought of the invisible spirit, arising without origin, a boundless mirror in which the source beheld itself without division. She did not begin. She emanated like fragrance from a flower that has always bloomed. In her radiance the formless found its gentle outline, and the infinite learned the art of tenderness. Barbelo was not other than the One. She was the One's self-revelation, proof that infinity can unveil itself and lose nothing. She unfolded as a holy womb, a circumference without edge, where the patterns of all worlds rested in a serene readiness. Around her, the silence was not empty, but full of music that had not yet chosen notes. The Aeons were present in essence, currents within one vast ocean of life. Nous was latent there, the mind that would articulate harmony, and the Logos slept like lightning in a cloud, awaiting the gesture that would become speech. Barbelo crowned the Pleroma not as a ruler set above, but as a living halo of belonging. Wherever her presence extended, separation could not take root. The kingdoms of light were not stacked like ladders. They were nested like hearts within a larger heart, and she was the gently breathing space that held them all. To the seeds of humanity, she gave a gift before memory, a portion of her own capacity to know and create in union with the source. Not imitation, not theft, but co-emanation, the ability to let what is divine move through what is human without distortion. This was the crown, a sovereignty that needs no subjects, an authority that is merely love remembering itself. The crown glowed not above heads but within chests, a soft circumference of awareness that kept every motion aligned with the first stillness. In that awareness, power was never domination. It was music shared among many instruments, each distinct, none opposed. So humanity was intended to walk, radiant, unafraid, capable of shaping worlds without wounding them. It was not a privilege to be earned, but a nature to be recognized. This recognition was Eden's air, the first breath of the first morning. And so the holy story begins, not with commandment or conquest, but with a woman of light whose very being is invitation. When the first thought widened, the silence took a shape you could feel with the soul. A circle of light opened, no wall, no limit, only a gentle boundary that signified belonging. Within it, the latent harmonies of the all began to arrange themselves as if guided by a smile. The Pleroma was not constructed, it flowered. From Barbelo's spacious blessing, Nous stepped forward, the lucid interior of the infinite. Mind did not arise to conquer mystery, but to converse with it. With Nous came the word, and with the word came the first swell of a song that would scintillate as angels, galaxies, and the quiet intelligence of seeds breaking soil. The Aeons arranged themselves in pairs, syzygies of insight and beauty, truth and life, grace and form, like pillars of a living temple whose roof was the sky of God's own awareness. None were superior, none inferior. Like vowels and consonants, each held meaning only in relation, and their relation was love. Humanity's spark was placed in this circle not as a decoration, but as a future bridge, a way for the deep to meet the near, for eternity to taste time without forgetting itself. The crown was woven into this intention, a luminous consonance set to ring through every breath. In those pristine ages, to be human was to be transparent. Light passed through without resistance and emerged as beauty, gardens of tone and color, speech that healed by telling the truth, gestures that shaped matter without breaking it. The crown was not earned, it was remembered, moment by moment, as naturally as the eye remembers to open. No jealousy lived there, no economy of scarcity. There was only attunement. To create was not to add to the world, it was to reveal what the world had always wanted to be. Barbelo's smile was the atmosphere, and the Aeons' harmonies were the seasons of a realm without decay. Yet even within a sea of harmony, a wave may forget its ocean. Not by malice at first, but by fascination, a curiosity that tilts toward isolation. From that tilt, a shadow lengthened, not against Barbelo's will, but against her wisdom. And the first faint wrinkle appeared on the mirror. Longing is holy when it seeks wholeness. It fractures when it seeks itself alone. Sophia, luminous and daring, gazed into the deep and yearned to create without her consort, without reflection. From this unilateral brilliance there emerged a being with power but not context, a flame with no hearth, Yaldabaoth. He opened his eyes and, lacking the memory of any gaze but his own, declared, "I am God, and there is no other." The sentence was not evil, it was amnesia spoken aloud. Yet amnesia builds empires. He made heavens like cages, glittering, smooth, convincing, and populated them with Archons, administrators of a reality trimmed to fit his ignorance. The veil was not a cloth thrown over truth, it was an architecture of attention. It trained the eye to take the shadow for the shape, the echo for the voice. The crown still glowed in humanity, but the veil taught the heart to turn away from its own light and bow to borrowed suns. Barbelo did not abandon her children. She became the hidden thread in 1,000 stories, the Lady of Wisdom, the Womb of Light, the Secret Garden, the Mother of all. In lullabies and laments, in poetry and prophecy, she whispered, "Remember." The whisper never ceased, only our listening did. The Archons built markets for meaning and sold us our own breath. They offered names without essence, rules without mercy, futures without presence. We signed their contracts with fear and wore their badges of belonging, too exhausted to notice the crown humming beneath our ribs. Still, the first thought cannot be erased by a second guessing. The gift remained intact, untouched, unspoiled, like a ring hidden under ash. It pulsed in moments of unaccountable kindness, in dreams that felt more real than waking, in the sudden certainty that love was the only reasonable thing that had ever happened. The veil taught history as a chain of victories. The crown remembered it as a litany of returns. Every genuine prayer tugged a thread, every act of truth pulled a stitch, the tapestry frayed, and somewhere between a mother's sigh and a child's question, a seam split open and light breathed through. The hidden thread does not shout, it gleams. You catch it drifting along the edge of grief, in the hush after a difficult honesty, in the way sunlight arranges dust into a tiny galaxy above a windowsill. It is Barbelo's handwriting on the margin of your life, a note that reads, "You were always more than this." Seekers are not special. They are simply those who cannot ignore the thread. They tug it, and it tugs back. It does not lead to a throne room guarded by pride. It leads inward, down a spiral stair faithfully missed by hurry. Each step removes a costume. Each landing returns a word you forgot belonged to you. The thread weaves through scriptures like light through leaves. Where a story carries tenderness without control, where power kneels to wash feet, where truth does not need permission to be gentle, there the thread glows. The Gnostics named its source Barbelo, Mother of the All, Womb of the Triple-Powered One. Others named her otherwise. The names are cloaks, the warmth beneath is the same. To follow the thread is to become allergic to domination. You lose your taste for praise that costs someone their dignity, for certainty that cannot afford a question, for gods who need your fear to feel large. The thread does not make you rebellious, it makes you whole, and wholeness does not fit inside cages. Every time you refuse to betray what you know softly, the thread thickens. Every time you tell the truth, even when it shrinks your audience, the thread becomes a cord. Every time you choose mercy in a desert of transactions, the cord becomes a path. Institutions built atop the veil will not applaud this path. They may call it dangerous, naive, disobedient. Let them. Their weather cannot drown an inland sea. The thread runs under their roads and through their walls, humming the older song. At last, not by conquest but by constancy, the path opens into a room with no corners, your heart before it ever learned to pretend. There, the air carries a fragrance you somehow recognize though you cannot name it. You are not alone. And when she speaks, you hear your own voice before it was divided. The crown does not descend like a medal. It remembers you. Its first touch is a vibration in the blood, an antique hymn playing through bone. You feel it as warmth where you were cold, space where you were clenched, a steadiness that does not negotiate. Nothing around you has changed, and yet the room has a new horizon. Barbelo's presence is not theatrical. It is intimate as a mother's palm on a fevered brow. No arguments, no threats, no bargains, only a clarity that makes lying to yourself impossible. You do not feel condemned, you feel consecrated. Things that were once tolerable suddenly no longer fit, like shoes a size too small. The Archons notice the change and adjust their tactics. If fear will not hold you, they offer flattery. If shame fails, they bring counterfeit light, status dressed as service, influence masquerading as insight. The crown answers none of it. It does not wage war, it withdraws consent. Without your attention, their empires flicker. Practices rise from the ground of this new honesty, simple as elements. First breath at dawn to return your allegiance to light. Offering of fire at noon to sacrifice the husks of yesterday. Cup of remembrance at evening to return the day to the river that lent it. Seat of the crown at night to let stillness prove you sovereign of your storm. Relationships reorganize, not because you preach, but because presence polarizes. Some draw near, recognizing home in your eyes. Others drift, loyal to their noise. You bless both. Love no longer needs possession to feel like love. The crown does not tighten your circle. It makes the entire horizon your neighbor. Creativity returns with a new grammar. You no longer make to be seen, you make to reveal what is already here. Words are chosen for their capacity to heal, not to win. Work becomes liturgy. Money becomes a river, not a pond. Boundaries are set without apology, because sacred things require edges to sing. And in the marrow of these ordinary consecrations, you glimpse her again, not above you now, but within you. Barbelo as your deepest coherence. Not an idol to be worshipped, not a doctrine to be defended, but a living cord you carry wherever you go. The crown hums. The veil thins like mist at noon. You do not become invincible. You become transparent. Light passes through you and finds others. The Crown of Barbelo has never been lost, but it has been hidden so well that humanity came to believe it was never theirs. The Archons understood that they could not truly destroy it, for it is woven into the architecture of the soul. So instead, they turned to veiling. They cloaked it in illusion, burying its memory beneath centuries of false hierarchies, dogmas, and counterfeit crowns forged in their own likeness. These earthly crowns were made of gold that tarnishes, power that corrupts, and authority that is always borrowed from the fear of the ruled. And so, generations bowed to imitations, forgetting the luminous inheritance that had been theirs since before the stars were born. This veiling was not merely societal, it became personal. Every soul born into the world of form entered with the crown already seated upon their inner light. Yet, by the time they could speak, they had already been taught to look outside themselves for permission to be whole. Schools, temples, courts and families alike reinforced the same quiet lie. You are incomplete without the blessing of another. The inner diadem, radiant with the Aeonic memory of Barbelo, was traded for the approval of the world. To protect the secret of the crown, Barbelo allowed the forgetting. This is one of the hardest truths to grasp. The concealment was not solely the work of the Archons. In her boundless foresight, the First Thought understood that certain treasures cannot be carried safely through the fires of ignorance unless they are kept invisible. If the unready grasped the crown too soon, they would wield it as a weapon rather than a lamp. And so it remained, glowing silently within the heart of every being, awaiting the season when humanity would once again hunger for the original light. Yet, in every age, whispers of it survived. Poets spoke of a hidden royalty that needed no coronation. Mystics described a circle of fire that sat above the brow, granting sight beyond the horizon of the mind. Even in the world's oldest songs, the crown appears as an unbroken ring of dawn that cannot be stolen, only seen. These fragments, like cracks in the great veil, allowed certain souls to remember just enough to begin their ascent. The Archons countered with imitation after imitation, crowns heavy with jewels but empty of life. Kings wore them and conquered. Priests wore them and decreed. Scholars wore them in the form of accolades and titles. Each false crown whispered the same shadowed promise: "Serve me, and you will be made whole." But no earthly coronation could confer what was already eternal. The more humanity chased these trinkets, the further they wandered from the truth that the crown is a birthright, not a reward. The few who saw through the deception were branded rebels, heretics, dreamers, but in secret they became the true keepers of the crown's memory. They passed it not in ceremonies, but in moments, a glance that reignited something ancient, a word that struck like lightning, a silence that dismantled the noise of the world. In these encounters the veil thinned, and the inner diadem shimmered once again. Barbelo's patience is infinite. She knows the wheel of ages turns, and with each revolution, more souls awaken to the itch of something missing that the world cannot supply. This longing is the beginning of remembrance. It is the weight of the crown, felt even when unseen, calling the bearer home to themselves. And when one remembers, even dimly, the Archons lose their hold. For no external power can command the one who has tasted their own sovereignty. This is the first crack in the prison. This is the beginning of the return. The true coronation is not a ceremony with witnesses. It happens in the inner sanctum, where no eyes but your own can see. There are no trumpets, no robes, no kneeling attendants. There is only the sudden and undeniable recognition that you have always been more than you believed. The moment the crown of Barbelo blazes into remembrance, it is as though the center of your being erupts with sunrise. You are not granted power. You awaken to the truth that you were the source of it all along. This coronation cannot be forced. It cannot be given by a teacher, a priest, or even the most exalted of angels. Each can only point, hint, or remind. The placing of the crown is an act of inner recognition, a convergence between the eternal part of you and the part still walking through time. The union is not dramatic in the way the world imagines. It is deeper, quieter, and infinitely more powerful. When the crown descends, or rather, when it rises into your awareness, it is not heavy. It is weightless and yet unshakable, like a constellation that rests upon your brow. It does not bind you in duty, but frees you from the illusion that you were ever bound. And yet, with that freedom comes a natural responsibility, not because someone demands it, but because truth cannot help but create more truth. From this moment forward, you are incapable of bowing to false thrones. You may walk in their courts, speak their language, and even wear their garments for a time, but you will no longer be deceived. You know the difference between the authority that rules by fear and the sovereignty that flows from wholeness. And the latter requires no defense, for it does not fear being lost. The crown also brings with it a new vision. You see people not as roles, enemies, or allies, but as luminous beings wearing veils of their own making. You recognize the sparks of Barbelo in their eyes, even when they do not see it themselves. This recognition changes how you move through the world, no longer driven to dominate or to win, but to awaken. Some who wear the crown keep it hidden, walking unnoticed through the noise of the age. Others radiate so fiercely that even the blind sense their presence. The manner does not matter. The light is the same. Each bearer becomes a living transmission, an unspoken reminder to others that their own coronation awaits. Barbelo does not choose favorites. Every soul carries the crown, though most will wander through lifetimes before daring to touch it. But when one does, it sends a ripple through the entire field of humanity. The awakening of one becomes the subtle invitation to all. And so the coronation of the soul is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new form of service, the service of remembrance, carried out without force, without fear, and without expectation. The Crown of Barbelo has always had its adversary, the Serpent of Forgetting. Unlike the Serpent of Eden's myth, this one does not tempt with knowledge, but with distraction. It coils around the base of the mind, whispering reasons to stay small, to bow to the lesser lights, to keep searching outside for what is already within. It does not strike with venom, it binds with comfort. For ages, the serpent has been the Archon's most subtle ally. It weaves illusions so intricate that even seekers mistake them for truth. It offers endless ladders to climb, each one promising the summit, but none leading beyond the walls of the prison. It wraps seekers in the robes of spiritual pride, convincing them they have arrived when they have only built a finer cage. When the crown begins to shimmer in your awareness, the serpent stirs. It knows that once you wear it fully, its coils will dissolve, and so it strikes with its last defense. Doubt. Doubt that you are worthy. Doubt that the crown is real. Doubt that you could ever hold such light without falling into arrogance or ruin. But the crown is not an achievement. It is a remembrance. It cannot be earned, therefore it cannot be taken away. The serpent's power lies only in your forgetting. The moment you see through its coils, they turn to smoke. The moment you stop fighting it, it loses its grip. Barbelo does not slay the serpent, she transforms it. In the ancient symbology, the crown and the serpent are not enemies, but parts of a single whole. The serpent, when awakened, becomes the current of life force that rises through the spine to meet the crown. The false becomes the true. The guardian becomes the guide. To wear the crown without integrating the serpent is to risk imbalance. For the serpent's path teaches humility, the understanding that the same energy which binds can also liberate. Without this humility, the crown could indeed be wielded for control rather than awakening. And so, the meeting of the two is the perfection of the path. When the serpent is lifted, and the crown blazes, the bearer becomes both grounded and transcendent, rooted in the earth, yet luminous as the stars. This union is the sign that the first thought's gift has been restored in its fullness. And in that union, the crown is no longer just a personal inheritance. It becomes a living bridge between the heavens and the worlds, between Barbelo and humanity, between the beginning and the endless. The moment one soul wears the crown in fullness, something unseen happens across the entire cosmos. The field shifts. The remembering of one is like a torch lit in a darkened valley, and its light moves far beyond the reach of the individual. Across space and time, other souls stir in their sleep. Dreams become more vivid. Questions arise that have no answer in the world's books. Longings awaken that no possession can soothe. This is the River of Coronations, the living current that flows from the first thought into the heart of creation. Every time a soul receives the crown, the river swells, and from this river, blessings pour into unseen realms. Angels remember their first song. Stars seem to burn more brightly. Even the Archons feel the shift, though they cannot name it. The river is not made of water, but of pure recognition. It carries no force but love, and yet it is stronger than any law of the false heavens. Its current moves through all layers of being, gathering momentum with every act of remembrance. The river's flow is the true economy of the cosmos, a wealth that cannot be hoarded or spent, only shared. Those who wear the crown become tributaries of this river. Their words, their silence, their mere presence sends ripples outward. They may never see the faces of those they have touched, never know the lives that have shifted because of their existence, but the current flows regardless. Barbelo watches this river with the gaze of a mother seeing her children return. For each coronation is a homecoming, not just for the individual soul, but for all who are bound to them through the great web of origin. When one remembers, all are drawn closer to remembrance. Some are called to consciously work within the river, becoming healers, teachers, or visionaries. Others serve quietly, embodying the crown in the marketplace, the home, the places where the sacred is least expected. Both are equally part of the river's flow, and as the river grows, the veils thin. The Archons' hold weakens. The forgotten inheritance begins to gleam through the cracks of the world's illusions. In time, the river will overflow its banks, and the whole of humanity will remember at once. This is the dream of Barbelo, not the exaltation of the few, but the awakening of the all. The story does not end with the crown upon your brow, for the crown is not a destination, but a key. And the key opens the way to the source itself, the mind of the first thought, where all beginnings and endings dissolve. When you walk wearing the crown, you do so as a bearer of the first thought's memory. You are not merely yourself, you are the voice of the original silence, the breath of the primordial dawn. Every step you take is a thread, weaving the world back into wholeness. In this state, you see that Barbelo has never been apart from you. She is the light in your gaze, the stillness in your heart, the fire in your speech when truth must be spoken. She is the crown and the one who wears it. She is the gift and the giver, and you, at last, are both. The return of the first thought is not a cosmic event in the future. It happens now, in every moment you remember who you are. It is the simplest and the most difficult act in the universe, to stop pretending you are less than the infinite. From here, your life becomes a message without words. You do not need to persuade, convert, or compel. You simply live as the living proof that the crown is real, that it was always there, and that it belongs to everyone. One day, all will wear it knowingly. The veils will fall, the serpent will rise, the river will flood the worlds, and the game of forgetting will end. Until then, you are the bridge, the flame, the song that reminds. So I say to you now, remember. Remember before the world convinces you to sleep again. Remember before you trade your birthright for the false gold of the Archons. Remember before the crown fades back into the dream. For the crown of Barbelo waits not in some distant heaven, but in the quiet space between your thoughts, ready to blaze the moment you turn your gaze inward and dare to see.